Okay, so as I said, it's raining fairly hard here, and I actually just had one of my family members from overseas drop in for a visit, so they are here now. So I'm not going to go beyond an hour this evening, so we can spend a little time together. But anyway, we will see what we can do in getting through the first part of Daniel chapter 10. So let's do a quick review of what we saw in chapters 8 and 9. And before I do, Sister Suzanne, you can go ahead.
She was saying that if you could leave ask that the questions be that until after you finish and have prayer. She says sometimes the questions are too long after you're finished, and some people are left without getting the blessings of the prayer.
All right, so we will go to the Bible and just do a quick review of what we looked at last week before we actually go on to Daniel chapter 10. So in chapter 9 of Daniel, we saw where something is going on here. Oh, yeah, my computer is moving a little slowly for some reason, so maybe that's the root of the problem. Anyway, the main focus of what we looked at in Daniel 8 and Daniel 9, I'm going to bring up one of my charts just to highlight our review, what we are looking back at. Give me a second here. All right, I'm going to stop my share and then do it again. Okay, so I assume can you see my screen now with the chart? Somebody put up your hand. All right, thank you, Sister Helena. So this is what we were looking at last week and the week before. This prophecy where we saw that according to Daniel chapter 8, there was to be a period of 2,300 days. And then in Daniel chapter 9, we saw that the angel came back to explain to Daniel what this prophecy was about. And we noted that this prophecy was to be at the time of the end. This was clearly stated by the angel. So in Daniel chapter 9, the angel came back and told Daniel he was to consider the vision. Then he explained that 70 weeks were cut off specifically for the Jews. And we saw that 70 weeks was 490 years. And then he went on to explain that 70 weeks was to be divided into 7 weeks, and then 62 weeks, and then 1 week. And so we saw that this period of 490 years, it ended in AD 34. When the gospel message was taken from the Jews and it was carried to the Gentiles. So this was the first 490 years out of the 2,300 years. And then if you take 490 from 2,300, what is left is 1,810. And so that would bring us to the year 1844. So I'm going to take a little time this evening, probably before even going to chapter 10. We're going to take a moment and look at the year 1844. And we also spent some time looking at the other explanation. There's an alternative explanation to this prophecy. But as we spent some time last week looking at why is it that this other explanation really doesn't make sense, and it's here, it's illustrated here. Now in this other explanation, they only look at the 70 weeks. So they start out by saying, okay, it's similar. Just a second. All right, they start out by saying it's similar. You have a period of 70 weeks for 90 years, just like we looked at. 7 weeks plus 62 weeks, just like in the other interpretation. And then 1 other week, just like in the other interpretation. But the problem is that in this interpretation, they have made a separation between the first part of the prophecy, and they have inserted what they call a gap. So they split the 70 weeks by this huge gap. So you have 7 plus 62. Then according to them, you have a gap, something that is not mentioned at all by God. And then after that, you have the last week. So the belief is that God was dealing with the Jews for 49 years, that's 7 weeks, plus 62 weeks, that's another 434 years. And then after that, there was 7 more years to come, 1 more week. But God stopped everything. God said, hold on, let's stop the action here. I'm not dealing with the Jews anymore. That was at the death of Jesus, where you see that black cross. They say, God said, I'm not going to deal with the Jews anymore. I'm going to stop dealing with the Jews. And I'm going to start dealing with the Gentiles. So God started dealing with the Gentiles for 2,000 years. And this they call the gap. The gap between the 69th week and the 70th week. So in this gap, it's the Gentiles' time. It's the time of the Gentiles. And then God is done with the Gentiles. And then he goes back to the Jews. He goes back to the Jews. And he starts dealing with them again for 7 more years. They become his special people. So I won't go into talking about what an illogical, confusing idea that is, because we commented on that last week. But this is the other theory. And I will say without hesitation that this theory is absolutely incorrect. So this is the interpretation that I believe is the correct interpretation, where 70 weeks are really a part of the 2300 days. Daniel was told that he was to consider the vision. And the vision he was to consider was this 2300 days vision. And then 70 weeks for 90 years were cut off from that point, from that period. And so the rest of it takes you up to the year 1844. All right, so I'm aware of Sister Suzanne's request that we keep all the questions until the end. And I'm all in favor of that. But I'm going to do something here just for a minute. I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask, is there any question relating to what I just said? Because as I have been saying week after week, I really want to make sure that everybody understands the technicalities of this prophecy. If it seems to be kind of technical and it seems to be a little challenging to understand, remember, it's God who put it there. It's God who put it there. This is not something that anybody is inventing and putting together to make difficult. It's God who put the challenge there in the Bible. It's a riddle that is put there by our Father. And God put it there because he intended it should be understood. So it's one of the things that I count a delight to take up these prophecies and to try to understand what is the meaning of these times and these things that seem to be so confusing. It's a joy when you are able to decipher these riddles, because our Father put them there in order for them to be understood. So the only thing I'm insisting on and that I want to make sure is that if it's not clear to you, I want to make sure that you ask me to explain the part that you don't understand. Anyway, so far it seems that everybody is understanding pretty well. All right. So let's go back to the Bible again. All right, the Bible. Okay, so what we have seen, what I've suggested, I'm in agreement with the idea that this time period here actually takes us to the time 1844, the year 1844. So the question that comes to mind is, what happened in 1844? And maybe I should really let me stop sharing again. I'm a little tentative when it comes to explaining the year 1844, and I will explain why. The prophecy of the 2300 days is one of the teachings of the Adventist Church that is most heavily criticized. It's criticized by all other Christians. It's heavily criticized. And in fact, a lot of the people who leave the Adventist faith, people like me, they completely abandon that teaching and they claim that it's a false teaching, and I'll explain why. Now, I'm one of those who, I'm not a member of the Adventist Church. I openly do not want to be labeled as a Seventh-day Adventist because I don't want it to be said that I believe some of the things they believe. I'm one of those who has been separated from the denomination since 1985. So I've been out a long time. But I have not come to the place where many of these others have come, where they claim that the whole 2300 days prophecy is a fake. They say it's fake and there's no validity to it, and scripturally it is not a sound teaching. I am not there. I'm a little uncomfortable with it because it is so connected to Adventist ideas that the moment you claim to believe it, everybody puts you in the Adventist box. And I don't want to be there. But at the same time, I so much want to be faithful to what is true to the Bible. I can't abandon it. So I'm in a place where I'm a little bit uncomfortable, but I still have to stick with what is true. And I believe all of you will understand where I'm coming from. Now, let me remind you of what happened in 1844 so you can get an idea of why some people are so anti this teaching, okay? Now, as you know, most of you know, is that the person who, as far as we know, nobody else ever did this before. As far as we know, the person who came up with this, the foundation of this idea, was a Baptist preacher by the name of William Miller. He was not a pastor. I think he was a deacon or something, but he became a Bible student. He used to be some kind of agnostic skeptic, and then he was converted, and he became very much interested in studying the prophecies. So William Miller is the person who began to study these prophecies of Daniel, and he is the one who came upon this 2300-day prophecy and set his mind to understand it. So as he went back and studied, he came to the same dates that we looked at last week and the week before. Those dates we have been looking at. The command to restore and build Jerusalem, the rebuilding of the city, the 62 weeks, the coming of the Messiah, and all the rest of it. William Miller looked at that, and he connected it to the 2300 days, and he came to the conclusion that the 2300 days would end in 1843. So based on his calculations, he believed that Jesus would have come in 1843. But afterwards, he discovered that there was a mistake in his calculation, and it was not 1843, it was 1844. So, because of this, William Miller began to teach that Jesus would come back to this earth on the 22nd of October in 1844. Now, why did he say October 22? Why did he come up on that date? I'll get to that in a moment. But before I get there, everybody, all of us understand, William Miller was wrong. He was wrong. He claimed that Jesus would return to the earth in 1844, October 22, and he was wrong. And there's no question that he was wrong. But why did he make such a big mistake? Because William Miller did something that we should never do. He was so careful in his studies, but he was not so careful when he was studying the question of what is the sanctuary? What is the sanctuary? William Miller came to the conclusion that the earth is a sanctuary. Where in the Bible does he see that anywhere? Where does the Bible ever say that the earth is a sanctuary? Now, what he was basing it off, let's go back to the Bible and share just so quickly. What he was basing this off is the biblical statement. Let's look at the statement again. You go back to Daniel 8, and in verse 14, it says, "And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." So William Miller calculated the 2,300 days, one day for a year, and he came to the year 1844, which is what I was sharing with you last week. But then it says, "Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." So William Miller has a problem. He has this to work out. Which sanctuary? Now, of course, he knew that the Mosaic sanctuary, the Old Testament sanctuary, the one built by Moses in the wilderness, and the one built by Solomon, and the one built by Herod, he knew that these temples were destroyed, and he knew that these were no longer applicable. God was done with the Old Testament system. Now, of course, you know, and I know, that there is a New Testament temple. There is a temple, there's a New Testament temple. At least there are 3 temples mentioned in the New Testament. One of them is the temple of your body. Your body is the temple of the living God. Another one is the temple of the church. Paul says in Ephesians chapter 1 that the church is being built up as a holy temple to the Lord. And the third temple that the Bible speaks about in the New Covenant is the heavenly sanctuary. You find that in Hebrews and you find that in Revelation. There is also a representation of the sanctuary in heaven. So there are 3 expressions of the temple in the New Testament. However, for some strange reason, William Miller used a 4th temple that the Bible never talks about. William Miller came to the conclusion that the earth, the planet Earth, is the sanctuary. Now, if you can find a verse that says that the earth is a sanctuary, I would appreciate you showing it to me, because I haven't done a deep study to find it, but I have done a scan through the Bible in my mind, and I can't find anywhere that gives anybody the reason to believe that this earth is the sanctuary. But William Miller came to that conclusion, and that is why when it says, on the 2,300 days, let us say this takes us to the year 1844, then the sanctuary will be cleansed. William Miller concluded that this means that in the year 1844, on the 22nd of October, Jesus was coming back to this earth. So, I'll explain why he came to October 22 in just a moment. So anyway, the people who embraced William Miller's teaching, and I understand that there were hundreds of thousands, there was a vast number of people, Christians from all denominations. Remember, at that time there was no Seventh-day Adventist church. These were Baptists, Methodists, probably Anglicans, Presbyterians, I don't know where they came from, Christian connection, but there were people from different denominations who accepted William Miller's teaching because just like we looked at the explanation of the prophecy, they looked at it and they saw that everything fit together. And so they were certain that the calculation was right. And somehow everybody missed the point that the Bible does not say that the earth is a sanctuary. So I understand that many of them, when they came to October 22, that day they said their goodbyes. Many of them didn't bother to reap their crops. They had their crops in the field. They had unfinished projects like a house not finished building. They just left it alone. And everybody gave up and they waited for the Lord to come that night because they were absolutely convinced that this was real. If you remember what I tried to share this morning, I was trying to say that when there is a sense that you have come to God's moment in time, people are willing to make sacrifices. People are willing to do things that you consider crazy because they have a sense that we have come to that moment in time when God is moving. Then people make great sacrifices. In this case, it was a wrong understanding of the Bible. But the conviction of the people was real. And so thousands of them, maybe hundreds of thousands of them, were waiting for the coming of the Lord that night. And when midnight arrived and there was no coming of the Lord, that day has been known in history, not just to Adventists, but to people in Christendom. It was known as the day of the great disappointment. Because thousands upon thousands of Christians were bitterly disappointed that day because Jesus never came. So this is what history remembers about William Miller and about the 2300 days and about the teaching of Miller. And that is why this doctrine is so heavily criticized, because they say this teaching is founded on a false premise. It's founded on a false experience. This man was teaching a falsehood and it fooled thousands of people. The entire thing is wrong. That's how people look at this prophecy. All right. So, I believe that when you look at the Bible fairly, you cannot say that they were wrong in their calculations. One of the things I pray about, right? I do pray and I ask the Lord for wisdom. But there are about four things in prophecy that I am asking the Lord to help me to understand better, right? About 4 things. One of them is the mark of the beast. One of them is about the king of the north and the king of the south. And one of them is the 2300 days prophecy. I'm asking the Lord to give me understanding. And I believe He is doing it and He will do it. But the reason is because it's such a pivotal prophecy. I believe it's so important to understanding the other prophecies that I don't want to be mistaken. I'm trying to be honest in how I look at it. And to be honest, when I look at it, I still end up with the year 1844. So, if this conclusion is wrong, I don't see anything that is better. And you can trust me that I've tried to look at everything that is said for decades, many years. And up to this point, there's no other explanation that is better than this, okay? Maybe it is wrong. Maybe the conclusion I come to is wrong. Nobody can be certain when you're looking at prophecy unless God Himself reveals it. But there is nothing better. I will tell you that. This is the best option of all the ideas that are out there. I know that there are people who criticize this interpretation of the prophecy. But you know, those people who criticize it, you know what they have to offer you? Nothing. I've spoken to many of them and they will tell you that This thing was based on a misunderstanding. It was based on a false idea and so forth. But they don't have any alternative. There's no explanation. It's like God just gave this prophecy and it has no meaning. It's just out there in a vacuum. So they will condemn what you try to explain, but they have nothing to give you in return. And to me, that is a poor exchange, right? That is like you swap a monkey for a black dog. Anyway, I will hold to it unless somebody can show me something better, because this makes the best sense as far as I'm concerned. So, we could talk a lot about this because there are so many things that are connected to it. But let's go back to Daniel 8. Let's go back to the chapter for just a little bit. I want to remind you of something that we said, or some things that we said when we were going through that chapter. Now, how did we explain it? I don't know if you remember. But you remember that this horn, we said that this horn, which we said represented the false religious system that was set up by the Roman Catholic Church. Remember the little horn that came out of the four winds? It became great even to the armies of heaven. It threw down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. We said this was talking about the persecution of the Christians during the Dark Ages. It says, this horn magnified himself even to the prince of the host. This power exalted itself to the place of Christ. And by this power, the daily was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now, I don't know how on earth William Miller came to the conclusion that the sanctuary was the earth. I don't know how he came to that conclusion, because look at what it says. It says it's the horn that cast down the place of the sanctuary. So how can it be talking about the earth? How can the earth be the sanctuary? How can any power cast down the earth to the ground? Cast it down. The earth is the ground. The world is the ground. So how could you cast down the earth? What would that mean? So William Miller missed this. And I'm going to tell you something else. The Seventh-day Adventist denomination misses this as well. Because Adventists came up with an explanation that, in my opinion, was equally faulty. And I'll explain that too. Since I'm going through this, I might as well explain that. But let me continue. It says a host or an army was given to this little horn against the daily, the word sacrifice is supplied, against the daily by reason of transgression. It cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. So we're looking at this Antichrist power, practicing and prospering. It exalts itself to the place of Christ, magnifies itself to the place of Christ, takes away the daily service, and throws down the sanctuary of Jesus Christ. So the question is asked. Then I heard one saint speaking. And another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, here's the question. How long? How long shall be this vision concerning the daily service, not sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation? Look at what he said. To give both the sanctuary and the host, the people of God, to be trodden underfoot. How long is this going to continue? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. William Miller, and I'm going to say the Adventist Church as well, they ignore this part of the prophecy. This is the context. This is the background. This is telling you what is going on. They completely ignore this, and they come to verse 14, and they give you a completely different conclusion. William Miller says that the sanctuary that was to be cleansed was the planet Earth. It was to be cleansed with fire at the coming of Jesus. But he forgets that the cleansing of the sanctuary, or the restoring of the sanctuary, it has to do with a restoration of what was done by the horn. The horn The horn cast down the sanctuary. The horn was treading the sanctuary underfoot. That is what was happening, and this was to come to an end after 2,300 days. William Miller just bypassed that and just went to verse 14 and took it like in isolation, like there was no other verses around it. He took it completely out of context. And so he believed that Jesus was coming back to this earth to cleanse the sanctuary. The earth is the sanctuary. He was wrong. Now, let me tell you what happened next. What happened next was that the Adventist movement grew out of that misunderstanding. All right, Brother Ray, Sister Susan asked if we could ask people to hold the questions till the end, because she says it breaks the train of thought. But if it's a quick one, you can
Yes,
go.
a quick one, David. Just very quickly. Did Miss White also endorse this erroneous teaching?
No, she didn't endorse William Miller's mistake, but she endorsed what Adventists came up with afterwards, which is what I'm going to talk about now. So, this is what happened next. And I know that probably most of us are very familiar with this history because most of us come from an Adventist background, but there are some people, some of us who don't. And I want us to understand thoroughly, because since we are doing the prophecy, it's good to understand the different elements that surround this prophecy and how it is understood. So, after that night of disappointment, some of those believers, they met together the following day. And of course, they were bitterly disappointed. And they were discussing together what was it that went wrong, because they felt certain that the way they calculated the time periods was correct. But they couldn't understand what they were doing, what was so wrong. Now, one of these believers, a man by the name of Hiram Edson, after they had that discussion, he was walking home or going somewhere, going to some other believers or something, and he was going through a cornfield. Now, what happened next? There's no clarity, because some people said he had an inspiration. Some people say he had a vision. Now, I'm inclined to believe that he got an idea, he got an inspiration, let's call it. But some people say that he got a vision. But whatever it is, he was going through the cornfield, and in his mind, with a vision or a thought, he saw Jesus in heaven as high priest. Now that is factual. And he saw Jesus moving from one apartment in the sanctuary in heaven to another apartment. That is what he claimed that he saw. It was like a bolt of inspiration to him. Like he came to the conclusion that this is what happened yesterday. Jesus didn't come back to earth. Jesus is in the sanctuary in heaven. And something happened in his ministry in that sanctuary. And this is what happened. Now, this is what Hiram Edson concluded. He ran back to the other brethren and he explained what he had seen or what conclusion he had come to. And they began to study from that perspective. So, I'll continue explaining. But let me just take Brother Ian's quick question.
Yeah, I really should have asked this a little bit earlier. When you're reading the part about the one little hand they cast down to the earth and all of these things, but did all these things happen at the time of the 2,300 days, end of the 2,300 days, after the 2,300 days? What's the time period that it happened?
All right. So, Brother Ian's question, to simplify it, he's saying that, it was said that the sanctuary and the persecution of the saints would continue until 2,300 days. Then the sanctuary would be cleansed. Now, in actual fact, the persecuting power was the papacy, the Roman Catholic institution. Now, the greatest persecutions of the Roman Catholic Church it didn't just stop immediately overnight. It began to be broken, first of all, by the Protestant Reformation. So in 1517, when Martin Luther nailed his theses to the church door, it started a revolution where the power of the Catholic institution began to be broken. But it took hundreds of years before that was properly broken. There was persecution that continued during subsequent centuries, but it was never as strong as before. So the power began to be broken. By 1798, the Pope, the power of the Catholic Church was so broken that the armies of Napoleon, the French General Napoleon, the French Emperor Napoleon, he was able to send his soldiers to capture the Pope. General Berthier went and took Pope Pius, I think it was Pius VI, he was taken captive. And so that marked the fact that the power of the Catholic Church to persecute, it was broken. Now this was actually 36 years before 1844. 1798, and 44 years would take us to 46 years would take us to 1844. So the power of the Catholic Church to persecute was actually broken, let's say 36 years before 1844. But 1844 marked the point. This is the important thing now that I want us to remember. Up to this point in time, and this is where I'm giving a lot of credit to the movement, to the Advent movement, all right? Up to this point in time, Jesus's place as and his work as a minister in heaven, it was basically ignored. It was not known. I mean, Martin Luther in the Reformation, he brought back an emphasis on on justification by faith. We are saved by grace through faith. The elements of the Reformation, which is embraced by most evangelical churches today, the elements of salvation by grace through faith, the forgiveness of sins, the grace of God, this is what is emphasized by all churches from the time of the Reformation right up until today. But what about the end time work of Jesus Christ? Now here's the point, and I want everybody in this fellowship to understand. The end time work of Jesus Christ is different, is something special that was not done before. I don't know how many people believe that what I just said is heretical or is false. Most Christians will tell you that this is not the truth. They will say that Jesus finished his work at Calvary. He went back to heaven and sat down on the right hand of God, and he's just waiting. He's just waiting to come again. I don't know why it has taken so long, but they do not understand that there is a further work that Jesus is doing down at the end of time. Anybody who doubts this, you can please stop me on the spot, and I will make that very clear. If you doubt this or you question this, you have not been sitting through our studies over the past few years. But this is absolutely the greatest focus of our work and ministry in this end of time. Jesus is doing something different and something special in the time of the end. It is first of all highlighted in the book of Daniel, and that is what this 2300-day prophecy is focusing on. And then when you come to the book of Revelation, it is laid out in great detail. The work of Jesus did not finish at Calvary. There's something more to the plan of God. And this is what the prophecy of Daniel is pointing towards. Something special was to happen. And for it to happen, the sanctuary had to be restored. Satan's purpose was to take away the knowledge of the work of Christ from the minds of people. What happened in 1844? Responding to Brother Ian's question, what happened in 1844? Is what focused attention again in the Christian world, in my world, in your world. What made us really begin to understand that there is a sanctuary ministry of Jesus it had its genesis in the mistake that happened in 1844. William Miller made a mistake, but it caused people to begin to study the sanctuary again. And I am open to anybody challenging me, but you can go back and search through history and see if you will find any emphasis on the sanctuary ministry of Christ before 1844. I don't think you will find it, because they were talking a lot about what Jesus did at Calvary, and they talked a lot about that, and not about the apostles and the message that they carried. But the end time ministry and message of Jesus Christ, most Christians do not know and do not care about it. And yet it is to be, I don't hesitate to tell you, it is to be our message. It is our mission to the world. And that is what the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation are about. I hope that is thoroughly understood. If you don't understand it, please stop me. I see Brother Ian, your hand is up. Is it still up or was it put up again? All right, it's down. Okay. So, these people who they were with Hiram, they studied together with Hiram Edson, and they came to the conclusion that the prophecy is talking about the sanctuary in heaven. But I'm going to show you where they went on to make another mistake. They went on to make another mistake. And I'm not killing people for making a mistake, because we make mistakes too, right? Where a mistake becomes a problem is where you hang on to it and you refuse to look more closely and to acknowledge where you made a mistake. Now, it's very clear to me that when they began to study this together, they were correct that the sanctuary was to be restored, but they focused on the word cleanse. The sanctuary is to be cleansed. And that led them to make another mistake. Now, all of what I'm saying is complicated. It can be complicated. So look here. Do we need to take a break, or should I continue? Because I want to make sure I don't want to confuse you by going on to something else. We are finished with William Miller. We saw how William Miller's mistake, they went over to this man, Hiram Edson, who saw that it had to do with the heavenly sanctuary. So we're going to go to something else again. Are we ready for that, or should we let this sink in for another week? Brother Ray, go ahead.
Yes, based on what I've learned throughout the years with you, with the group, I understand that we are the living temples of God. And when we are born again, we become the temples of God. Therefore, we are the sanctuary where God dwells within. So my question is, isn't part, or isn't what you're talking about also dealing with us as temples of God, as being places where God dwells within? Because He no longer works, with temples. He comes within us.
Yeah. Very quickly, Brother Ray, I would say in a secondary way, definitely not a primary way, because look at this. You have to put everything in context. Look at what it says. It says that the little horn cast down the sanctuary to the ground. Now, is that talking about us? Are we the sanctuary that was cast down to the ground? And it says that the sanctuary is to be restored. The restoring of the sanctuary is the one that was cast down. So it would mean that if it refers to us, it would mean that we were cast down and then we are to be restored. So the context of the passage, I don't think it can fit the idea that it refers to us primarily. Now, in a secondary sense, we can say it applies, because we can say, okay, whatever is going to happen is going to have an effect on us as the individual temples. Whatever Jesus is doing, it's going to affect us. So in that sense, you could say it has something to do with us, but not primarily. Primarily, I believe it has to do with something that is happening in the work of Jesus in heaven. And that is what we see in Revelation chapter 4. Revelation 4 shows you the God sitting on the throne with the book in his hand, and Jesus goes and takes that book out of his hand. I believe that is what it has to do with. Something happening in the sanctuary that is represented there, this heavenly sanctuary. So, let me go on to explain where I believe Adventists made a mistake. And this is a again, it requires a little attention. I'm going to explain this, and then after that, we are going to stop for this evening. All right? But let me see if I can explain it. And please, I understand why we don't want to have too many questions, but I am also eager to make sure we understand. So I'm going to repeat that if I'm saying something and you're not understanding, I want to be stopped if you're not understanding. I want to be stopped. I don't want to be blissfully carrying on and explaining and it's going over your head. What's the point? I'd like you to understand, okay?
Remember the date that you said that William Miller set. You were going to explain why.
All right, good. Yes, thank you, Brother Peter. So, why did William Miller say October 22? All right, we're actually going to go to that, Brother Peter. Now, William Miller made a second mistake, and I'm just recognizing that this mistake that William Miller made, it was taken up by Adventists. When I say Adventists made a mistake, actually I'm looking at it now and realizing that it was William Miller who actually made the mistake. Now, the word cleansed. One of the ways that people study the Bible is that they look for a word and they try to look for another place in the Bible that has the same word. Let me see if I can bring up any cross references here. All right, this Bible doesn't have the cross reference that might be there. But the word cleansed, there is a ceremony. There is a ceremony, and you're not actually seeing my Bible. Let me share my Bible. There's a ceremony that was involved in the sanctuary service. In the service of the sanctuary, you know that there were different services that took place on different days and during different seasons of the year. Now, one of those events that took place was referred to as the cleansing of the sanctuary. Or at least it was understood to be a cleansing of the sanctuary. If you go, I think most of you will know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the sanctuary that took place on the Day of Atonement. Now, if you go to Leviticus 16, it will tell you about the Day of Atonement. And this entire chapter is talking about the Day of Atonement. And let me see. I'm trying to look for a place where it actually says he would cleanse the sanctuary. But if you look at what it says, in verse 16, he shall make an atonement for the holy place because of the uncleanness of the children of Israel. He will do the same thing for the tabernacle of the congregation, which is among them in the midst of their uncleanness. And he shall go in to make an atonement in the holy place, make an atonement for himself and for his household and for all the congregation of Israel. He would go out to the altar that is before the Lord.
Oh, annoying.
Sister Viv, you're unmuted.
Oops, sorry.
He goes on to say, he shall sprinkle of the blood upon it with his fingers 7 times and cleanse it. He was going to cleanse the altar. And a lot of verses in this chapter talk about cleansing. It uses the word cleansing. And so this is also an illustration of how sometimes we can make a mistakes when we just go by proof texting, take a verse and compare it to another verse. There's more involved in studying the Bible than just something like this. But anyway, because this chapter talks about a cleansing taking place, it mentions cleansing of the people. but it also mentions cleansing of the sanctuary. On that day shall the priest make an atonement for you to cleanse you, that you may be clean from all your sins before the Lord, because this chapter talks about it so much. William Miller came to the conclusion that in this chapter is what God was talking about when he said that the sanctuary was to be cleansed. In the book of Daniel here, when he said, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. William Miller came to the conclusion that this was talking about the Day of Atonement. Now here's the thing. The theologians say context is king. King, K-I-N-G. I don't always agree with the theologians, but I agree with them wholeheartedly on this. The only thing that is greater than context is the word of a prophet. If God gives an inspired word, then context goes out the window. Many times God's prophecies are completely out of context. It doesn't matter. God says so, it is so. But for us who are not prophets, the best tool that we have is context. What it means is that you look at a statement and then you look at the passage that surrounds it to find out what it is talking about. Now, when you look at what it says here in Daniel 8, there's no way this is talking about the Day of Atonement. No way it's talking about the Day of Atonement. It's talking about the horn casting down the sanctuary to the ground. It's talking about the horn trampling the sanctuary underfoot. It's not talking about the uncleanness of the Day of Atonement. In the Day of Atonement service, the sanctuary was said to be defiled because of the sins of the people. And so the priest went into the sanctuary to clean the sins from the place and to clean out the sanctuary. This is not talking about that. This is talking about another kind of problem where the sanctuary of Jesus Christ was cast down and it was trodden underfoot by the little horn. That's the context and that's the meaning of this passage. It's not talking about the Day of Atonement. So, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. That's another problem. This word cleansed, right? Now, this word is from a Hebrew word, which can be interpreted 4 different meanings. Now, the King James Version, the translators chose to use the word cleanse. But if you look at the right panel, it says, then shall the sanctuary be properly restored. Because that's one of the possible meanings. It can mean vindicated, then shall the sanctuary be vindicated. Then shall the sanctuary be justified. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Then shall the sanctuary be restored. The context of the passage makes us understand the meaning is the sanctuary will be restored. So it's an overturning or a reversing of what the little horn did. So if we understand this and it means restored, what it means is that the little horn removed the knowledge of Jesus' work, set up a system of priests and churchcraft, and the knowledge of Jesus as our mediator in heaven and the work he's doing there was obscured for hundreds of years. But in 1844, at the end of the 2,300 days, the knowledge of the sanctuary would be restored. That's where I say William Miller and the early Adventists actually did something meaningful in terms of God's prophetic timetable. God wanted the sanctuary message to be restored, and he said it would happen in 1844, and it did. In spite of the fact that William Miller made such a big boo-boo, such a big mistake, but he brought focus to the date, and then the Adventists went further, and they began to focus on the sanctuary. Now, they misunderstood what the sanctuary was about because they thought it was the cleansing of the Day of Atonement. I'll have to wait until next week to go into that in depth. But they thought it meant that, okay, in 1844, the Day of Atonement is going to begin. I actually don't agree with that. But anyway. So they went to Leviticus chapter 16. And so they said, okay, the Day of Atonement. Okay, now we have something to work with. When is Jesus coming back? It says the sanctuary will be cleansed, and that is talking about the Day of Atonement. So they went back to study the calendar and so on, and they discovered that that year, the Day of Atonement would be on the 22nd of October, October 22. That is why William Miller came to the conclusion that Jesus was coming back on the day of atonement, which was the 22nd of October. And that is why they believed that on October 22, 1844, Jesus would return. It's because according to their calculations, that day was supposed to be the Day of Atonement. That's how they came to that date. Now the Adventists, as I said, what happened first of all is that Hiram Edson, with his vision or his inspiration, whatever it was, he turned the attention to the heavenly sanctuary instead of the earth. And so they came to the conclusion that, okay, we're going to have the Day of Atonement, just like William Miller said. But instead of the earth being cleansed, it's the sanctuary in heaven that is being cleansed. So this is where they worked out this idea of sins being piled up in the sanctuary in heaven year after year for 2,000 years. Every time you commit a sin, you confess a sin, the sin is transferred to Jesus and then transferred to the sanctuary. And that for 2,000 years, sins have been piling up. The record of sins have been piling up in the heavenly sanctuary. From there, they came to the conclusion, okay then, the cleansing of the sanctuary must be that in 1844, on the 22nd of October, Jesus was going to begin a work to clean out those sins, just like what happened on the Day of Atonement. And so they believe that the cleaning out of the sins means that he's going to go through the books where the sins are written down, and he's going to try to find out whose sins have been forgiven. Who are the people who have confessed their sins and who have acknowledged their sins? And then if you have confessed your sins and acknowledged your sin will be removed from the book, taken away from the book, and those sins will be gone. And so they believe that since 1844, Jesus has been doing this work, going through the book, removing the sins, and he started first of all with all the Christians who were dead. So he was going through the books to see which of these dead Christians really confessed and repented of their sins, and then he would be taking out these sins out of the books. And so he has been going through books from 1844 until today. And even from way back then, they had the belief that one day he's going to finish with the dead and he's going to go to the living. And so they believe that when he moves to the living, which is called the judgment of the living, when he moves over to the living, if your name is called, for example, if he comes to my name in the book, and I have sins in that book which are not confessed, then it's too bad. My name is going to be blotted out of the book because I have unconfessed sins and I've come to the and the judgment has reached to my name. Now this is what the Adventist teaching really entails. This is the conclusion they came to. And like I said, that is a part of the teaching that I absolutely believe is completely wrong. I believe it's wrong. I believe they have misunderstood what is really going on. And there's need of a sifting through to find out what was true and what was erroneous. That aspect of it definitely presents a view of salvation that is completely contrary to the gospel. It's contrary to the gospel. That's my considered opinion, and it also causes people to be afraid of what Jesus is doing. It causes people to be afraid. People have had poor spiritual experiences because of believing their names might be called at any moment and they may not be forgiven. And it leads people to the place where they believe that what is most necessary is for you to keep saying over and over, please forgive me. Every time you make a mistake, please forgive me. And if you forget to say it, it just might be so bad that your name happens to be called at that moment. Now it might sound like something ridiculous and something childish and silly, but I don't think I've misrepresented it. I think that's exactly how it is taught. And many of us here have been through our Revelation studies already, and so you know that the idea that we come to when we look at it and understand it from the true perspective is extraordinarily beautiful, very beautiful, very much in line with the gospel, and beautiful when we understand how it glorifies our Father. So some elements of what they latch onto were true, beautifully true, but the way they came to understand it was faulty. And I'll tell you something. I believe that one of the reasons why the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, two reasons why they have stuck with something that was so faulty, is because, number one, they became a denomination, and denominations don't change. Denominations don't change. When you become a denomination, your purpose from that point on is to cement your place as an institution. It's not anymore a primary concern to search for truth. Now they put down the searching for truth to a body of theologians, and those theologians are paid by the church. So it's in their interest to teach or to prove what the church says is true. The growth in truth is quashed when you institutionalize. That's number one. That's the first reason why I believe they stuck with something that was patently false. And the second reason is because they never ever understood and truly received the message of Christ, our righteousness. Jesus really was never able to take control of the movement after it institutionalized, because Jesus was no longer the Lord of the movement. He was no longer the person who was the head of it, because Christ, our righteousness, was never a reality in the institution. I think those are the two reasons. But anyway, next week we are going to look at this more closely. Go ahead, Sister Talia.
Well, my only thoughts are, and thank you for, well, let me say it was interesting the way that you came about with the interpretations, or was led to the interpretations that you shared. With all that said, I believe with regards to Sister White's inspired writing for biblically the Seventh-day Adventists, or that movement, which was to be a movement and not a conference or whatever the case may be, the movement was to be the righteousness of Christ that went out into the world, such as at the time the Jews were called to go out into the world. Hence, we did lose that. And I'm not a I'm not even a Seventh-day Adventist. I didn't come out of that. I didn't come out of that denomination. I didn't even come out of Seventh-day Adventism. I came to know and love Seventh-day Adventism through the Bible, and I had probably shared maybe once in a blue moon ago, that I didn't receive the spirit of prophecy through Seventh-day Adventists. I came in with the Bible, understanding it and loving it through the Bible, because I myself was studying, and then the Lord led me to Seventh-day Adventism. So my contention is Christ was a Seventh-day Adventist, was he not?
I wouldn't say that.
When I say Seventh-day Adventist, he observed the seventh-day Sabbath.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's
Okay.
a kind of slick way of defending Advent.
No, I'm not trying to defend. I'm trying to understand, because there's such a clear misconception and speculation, even that we even have to come to try to understand the word from different perspectives, from different people, from different denominations. And that's my contention, because I didn't come out of it, but many people and most people have. So for me, it's not a matter of defending it. It's a matter of realizing what the Bible showed. And when I say Seventh-day Adventist, everyone takes that as such a harsh identification. But if we took it for what it means and the value of what it means, and I think you're going to find contention with this also, that we're observing the seventh-day Sabbath. I don't get it. And we are waiting for the soon coming, or hopefully by God's grace, the imminent return of Christ
Sure.
Jesus.
Let me tell you what I mean, Sister Talia. Okay? Technically, we are all Catholics, but I would never say that. You understand?
Yes,
Technically, we are all
universal.
Catholics
I
because
get it.
Catholic means the universal church. But I'm not going to say that because the label is associated with something. That's why I will not say I'm a Seventh-day Adventist either, even though if you get technical, I'm a Sabbath keeper and I believe in the coming of Jesus. But the label identifies you with something. That is what I'm saying. Brother Ian and then Brother Lad.
I get it, and thank you.
Okay, Sister Tally.
Yeah, Brother David, by not accepting right Christ or righteousness, the righteousness by faith, understanding of doctrine, is basically putting yourself right back to what the little to the result of what the little horn did. Because isn't the work of Christ in the sanctuary basically encased in that whole understanding that he's our righteousness?
You're absolutely right. I agree with you 100% on that. What I would say, and here, trying to be as generous as possible, what I know is that when you're coming out of a state of darkness, you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to see everything at one time. So when you look back at the history of the development of Protestantism, for example, you had people like Huss, Jerome, Martin Luther, Wycliffe, Tyndale. You had many of these people. And some of them that we hold as heroes were horrifying people. For example, John Calvin had people burned at the stake. Martin Luther recommended it as well. And these are heroes of the Reformation. But you understand they were coming out of a system of extraordinary darkness and they came to the light little by little. They probably never did. Their followers, it was a developing movement. So when you look at Adventism, as you say, by failing to grasp righteousness by faith as it truly is, they were actually returning to principles of Catholicism. But to be generous, you are thinking that, okay, some of these nuances that we can see today, they might not have seen. So they were making mistakes, but in making those mistakes, unfortunately, they encased the movement in a system and in a situation from which it has not been able to escape even till today, which is one of the reasons why God keeps calling people out. God keeps moving the movement forward, but he's doing it independent of those who stay where they are. Yes, Brother Lad, go ahead.
Okay, do you mind to summarize your interpretation of the sanctuary shall be cleansed? What do you think that means again, please?
Okay, so first of all, I am not using the word cleanse, I'm using the word restored, which I believe to be the correct translation, because as I said, the word itself can mean four things. And I think the King James Version shows cleansed, but I think in the context of the passage, it is saying that the little horn attacked the sanctuary and threw it down to the ground. So the sanctuary has been trampled underfoot. And so God was saying that at the end of the 2300 days, the sanctuary would be restored. So when you look at this sanctuary, what we understand is that the sanctuary of the new covenant, there are three manifestations of that sanctuary. One is your body, one is the church, the Christian church, and the other one is a sanctuary in heaven. So the sanctuary that was cast down to the ground is a sanctuary associated with the ministry of Christ, because it says the horn exalts himself to the place of the prince of the host and cast down his sanctuary to the ground. The sanctuary that was cast down to the ground, it means the work of Jesus, the place of Jesus as a minister in the heavenly sanctuary was taken away by the Roman Catholic darkness of the Dark Ages. So, in other words, the sanctuary was cast down means that Jesus and the work he's doing was taken from the minds of the people. There's no question this was absolutely done by the Catholic system. You went to the priest, not to Christ. You went through the church, not through Christ. Christ was basically unknown until the Reformation started a restoration. Now, when the Reformation started a restoration, there was no emphasis on the sanctuary work of Christ. The first place that this great emphasis on the sanctuary began was with the movement that started in 1844. So in 1844, there was a restoration of the sanctuary truth. The truth of Christ's ministry in the sanctuary was restored in 1844. Now, why is that important and how relevant is that? That's what I want to talk about next week. But in a nutshell, lad, that's what I was trying to say.
Okay, second question. Calvin and Luther, you said had them put to burned at the stake. Was this before their revelation of the Roman Catholicism's corruption in Scripture, in it, or was that after?
No. After Calvin became a reformer and broke away from the Catholic Church, subsequently, he recommended burning. As a matter of fact, a non-Trinitarian by the name of Michael Servetus, if I'm not mistaken, Calvin was the one who ordered him to be burnt at the stake. He was burned alive by Calvin. Because Calvin broke away from Catholicism's legalism, but he never broke away from the principles, many principles of Catholicism, like using force to promote what you believed. Luther had the same kind of attitude and recommended violence against those who would not accept his understanding of justification by faith. So it was a darkness they were coming out of.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, Sister Talia.
I guess this is a good time to, share whatever is unclear or not stable, because I want to be stable in my understanding. So, as Christ is our high priest, most high priest, I guess my misunderstanding
Sister Talia,
was, yes.
one moment there. Brother David, I don't think you understood what Sister Susan was asking. What she was asking is that when the Bible study is finished, that you have the closing prayer and then take questions after, so that people can be blessed by the closing prayer. That's what she was asking.
Oh, I didn't get that. But all right, we'll try to implement that afterwards. I've basically finished the presentation, so we just continue, and then next time we'll do that, brother. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Sister Talia.
I'm sorry. So my question would be then, as high priest, what is his, other than restoring, as that is the term used here, to restore what has been taken away or downtrodden by the
Papacy.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
what other functions does he serve with regards to, so is there any cleansing of our hearts, our minds? So I know that in that role that there would be some sort of cleansing of sin, or that was just the one time as he did it on the cross, and for the cleansing of the sin. I'm still,
as I said to Sister Talia, we live in a time when Jesus is going to be doing perhaps his greatest work represented in the sanctuary. Now, you have not been with us while we have been going through our Revelation studies, so I understand the question. But the entire book of Revelation is about this end time work of Jesus Christ in the sanctuary. So that in itself will tell you that I certainly don't believe that Jesus' work is done at all. You can't read the prophecies and come to that conclusion. I think that the focus of this prophecy in Daniel and the entire book of Revelation is this revelation of the final work of Jesus Christ. So absolutely, no, Jesus' work is not done. There's something, but I just think that it has been in many ways misunderstood and misrepresented. That is a problem. To understand what Jesus is doing in the light of Christ and his righteousness, that is the heart of the message that we want to focus on. And like I said, I will give I'll go into it more next week.
so you will add next week what more Christ is doing. Is that what you're saying right now?
Yes, I'm going to at least give a basic outline, because we're not going to go in depth until we come to Revelation, which we will get there when we get through the book of Daniel.
Okay.
Okay, Sister Talia. Brother Ian, go ahead.
I sense that part of her question was the atonement for sin completed at the cross.
I know, but I understand that. But yeah, I don't want to get too involved until we actually get to the place. because a lot of what some of the questions that are being asked require much explanation to really see the complete picture. And that is why, as I've been trying to go through one point at a time, step by step, and that's the reason why I keep asking, is there some point you don't understand? Then please ask me about that point, because I want to make sure that at least what we have dealt with has been understood. Okay? We are to go forward into areas that we have not touched yet. And that is fine. When we get there, I'm going to try to be equally thorough. But I want to make sure what we have touched on has been understood. All right.
Brother
So,
David,
yes, Sister Anita.
as far as I'm understanding, is that there's no way that Christ would come October 22, 1844, before the work that he was carrying on before is to be restored in you and me, and in the body of Christ, and in the temple in heaven.
In the kingdom.
And the kingdom, yes. This is what I'm understanding. And this is what we have not been taught in the Adventist church. Because as you rightly said that the work of Christ was finished, possible, on the cross.
Yes.
But it wasn't. So the work that Christ is carrying on, or will carry on in us today, and so on, it cannot come until those works are being fully restored.
Yes. To be perfectly fair, the teaching of Adventism says that Jesus is doing a work now. To be perfectly fair, they believe Jesus is doing a work now. The problem is, what do they understand to be that work? The expression and the explanation of that work is something very legalistic. That's the point. It's contrary. Yeah, so that is the issue with it, right? So while there is a work that Jesus is doing, to understand it properly is to enter into the beauty of these last days prophecies.
Yes.
So
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, Sister Anita. Yes, Brother Ray, I guess you'll have the last question. I don't see any other hands.
Yeah, that'll be a short one. Are we looking at a global spiritual outcry revival from many different persuasions in the work that you're explaining to us?
All right, that's an interesting question, and it's I have to be careful how I answer it, because we can become conceited and self-centered and bigoted, and we want to avoid that. But here's what I am going to say. In a recent presentation, I pointed out that Jesus said, Elijah truly shall first come and restore all things. When Jesus came, he came to Israel. But first of all, Elijah came, which was John the Baptist. There was a preparation for the work that Jesus was doing. And Jesus himself was a preparation for the outreach to the entire planet. Before that happened, there had to be a restoration. Now, the same principle applies at the time of the end, because it's type and antitype. And at the time of the end, what we understand is that before there is a global outreach, there has to be a restoration of certain fundamental things. And that's why I talked about the sanctuary being restored. The work of Christ and an understanding of what Jesus is doing needs to be restored to the Christian church before the Christian church can reach the world. Now, I believe that when the Christian church understands the truth of this restoration, then the power will come to witness to the message. The message, to go with power, you have to have a message, right? When there was a message, Jesus was given the power. When there was a message, the apostles were given the power. Today, until people understand God's end time emphasis, the power will not come. But then the power will come to give wings to the message when the message is ready. And I think, I honestly believe that in the restoration of this knowledge of Jesus' sanctuary ministry, which involves the secrets of the book of Revelation. You hear me keep talking about that, and those of us who have been going through the book, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I think that the people who understand this first will reach out, and God will use them to reach other Christians, and then the thing will explode to the whole world. It's a process.
So, David, which one we can say then is that Christian church? Because in the days of Jesus, you had the Jewish church.
Yeah, but what we have is an Elijah movement. And I'm believing and hoping that I'm a part of that movement. We have an Elijah movement. And what does Elijah do? Elijah restores the truth to Israel. And what is Israel? Israel is a Christian body. Israel is not a denomination. Israel is a body of Christians. We have a message for the Christian world. And then when we are able to impart this message, the Christian world is ready for a broader witness. That's what I think. Go ahead, Brother Ladd.
Okay, so in your view, or anyone else here that can explain this, because I wasn't raised Adventist. What is the incorrect understanding that Adventists have of Jesus working in the sanctuary now? Because I don't really, I've heard some vague explanations, but I would like to kind of get a little bit more of some an understanding of that to be able to compare to the true.
So you didn't come in at the beginning, right, lad?
No, sir, I didn't. I come in. If you covered that, please forgive me.
I did, but I'll go back over it, right?
Okay.
Adventists believe that in 1844, Jesus started a work of cleansing the heavenly sanctuary. And what does that mean? They think that every time any one of us commits a sin, it is written down in a book.
Oh no, David, that's not what I'm asking. The idea that his work now in it. This is what I was told him, and maybe I'm just getting ahead of you. I did hear that part. But I was heard that Christ is up there pleading his blood to the Father, whatever that means. Have you guys heard that? I was told this by a Trinitarian last week.
Yes.
Is that the same thing as what you were going to say?
It's a part of the same process.
Okay, forgive me. Go ahead.
So the sins that are stored in the books, there's a great gathering in heaven where Jesus is opening the books and he's going through the records of, let us say he comes to the name of Lad Harner, right? He comes to your name and you have committed sins, and he is pleading with God. He's pleading your case. He's arguing with God and explaining what are the circumstances why you committed those sins and asking God to forgive you of those sins. And if you have asked forgiveness for those sins, that is also should be recorded in the book. So he goes through the case and he pleads your case like a lawyer. He asks for forgiveness for you. And then when you are forgiven, your sins are blotted out of the books. You are sealed for eternity, meaning that you can never sin again and you will never fall back into a place where you can be lost. Now, granted, the idea is that this is happening for those who are dead. So dead people can't change their minds. Once the record is over, it's over. For us who are alive, he's also involved in pleading with God. When you commit a sin, Ellen White represented it, that he goes before God. He says, Father, my blood, my blood, my blood.
No.
And God forgives. So it's represented that he's doing that kind of work. And if you find it terribly offensive, I can understand.
Oh, yeah, I do. That's kind of little shocking, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I do have one. I'm so sorry. I have a question, Brother David. Not a question. I have two questions, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Sister Talia. Go ahead.
Which is, and I put it in the chat. So one of the things is oh gosh, here we go. Let me get it again. So then, we will then have to go through a serious persecution in order for a decision to be made for or against the truth of God. Am I understanding that correct?
Ye-
And if so, how so if the dead had been judged and we are to be judged, and I'm asking in an inquisitory way, how is that taking place? I mean,
All right.
or unless you have an answer for next week, and I'll wait.
Sister Talia, what you just expressed is what Adventists believe. I wasn't saying what I believe. That's what Adventists believe. Next week, I'm going to try to present what I believe to be the truth. And then I put it that way because I could say I'm going to present the truth. But I'm not going to be so arrogant like I can't be wrong. But I'm going to present what I believe to be the truth so that everybody can examine both ideas
Thank you.
and make your own conclusion. All right. So I think maybe many people here already have a clear idea because we have been through this before. But for those of us who will be going through this for the first time, hopefully we'll be able to compare. So this week I was looking at the popular idea and how Adventists got there, and why it is that even though we are studying the Bible, I can't get away from mentioning Adventists because some of what I believe to be the truth is connected to how they started out. But I believe that they were derailed by some wrong principles. And next week, as I said, we will look at this more closely. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for your participation, especially at the end when you ask questions. It's not only encouraging to me, but it's also, I believe, helpful for the other people because I'm sure that there are some people who are quiet and they don't fully understand, but they are getting an idea. So it's not that we want to highlight every error that is out there, but here's the thing. You never can understand how strong is your position until you compare it to what somebody else says, right? I could have been a Trinitarian and comfortable and think I was strong until I heard the non-Trinitarian position. Then when I compare both things, I realize that the Trinitarian position is weak. So I need to understand why is the Trinity weak to understand how strong the non-Trinitarian position is. And it's the same thing with this, right? You can't say your position is strong until you look at what else is out there. So that's my
David?
Yes.
Lad.
Yes, lad.
Real quickly, does the Trinitarian understanding somehow affect the way they come to this? I mean, like say, if you were discussing this with someone, would the Trinity, non-Trinity understanding have any significance with talking to a regular Adventist today? Does that throw them off? Does that lead to some of this in any way? I mean, do you have to address it to be able to help see this and receive it?
To understand the position that I consider to be true, you cannot be Trinitarian.
Okay, that's kind of what I'm wondering because I don't know. You somehow how you look to maybe address something, and I just wondered if these truths were being presented to your regular Adventists, could they understand it, or without first understanding that the Trinitarian concept of God is not true? Would you have to almost go back to dealing with the Trinity first to be able to move into a correct understanding of this particular aspect of Daniel?
Yeah, when we actually go over to the book of Revelation, it will come out very clearly that this understanding of the work of Christ, it doesn't fit in with the Trinitarian perspective at all. But yeah, I keep saying there's so much to cover, but one step at a time. Otherwise, we'll get thoroughly confused. But yes, thank you everybody, and thank you for the questions which have helped to clarify some of these things.
Thank you, Brother David. I truly appreciate it because most others, they don't consider that, it's through love that you're helping me and helping others to understand because you're right. Just as Jesus said, go first to the people or the children of God in Jerusalem. This is what I thought to understand the true God movement or present, whatever they call themselves or we call ourselves, is what they're supposed to do. So when that time does come, we're prepared to just share it as it was just stated, because it's hard to share something that you're not quite clear on.
Yes. Well, praise the Lord, Sister Talia. I'm grateful that it has been
Talia.
Talia.
Brother David,
Yes, Sister Anita.
this reminds me of it. Well, it just came to my thought when Christ came, upon this earth. He didn't went to the school of the Jews then, and though he tried to teach them the way of the Lord, they refused him, and so he had to call out 12 disciples of his own and taught them the right way of the Lord. And I believe that it's the same thing that is happening to us now. Many of us that, God has called out from the Adventist church. So we are in the school of the prophets now, being taught by Christ through you. This is the thought that came to me. And I believe this is true.
Well, it would be wonderful if that is true, Sister Anita. I would hesitate to make such a claim, but God knows what He's doing. So, and we're all here because He wants us to be here. So maybe there's some truth in that. But we will keep that quiet, and then we will see what He says.
Quiet, Brother David. It will come out. It is true. Thank you very much for teaching us. This is your study tonight is so clear and concise to me. Thank you.
Yes,
The
that's
Lord.
what I'm happy for.
Jesus is to tell everybody is that don't tell anybody.
Okay.
All right, Brother Ian. Yes, I hear you.
All right. Let's pray to close.